practices with your team as healthy as possible. In Seattle yesterday, it looked a little dicey. By the time it was all said and done, there were at least 5 fights during Seahawks practice, and it was one of the rare practices that owner Jody Allen actually attended. She got to see. Hope she brought some popcorn. She can afford a whole popcorn factory and then some. But hopefully she was entertained by the fighting that happened. Although there's a balance there. I was on KJR last night with Dave Mahler and Dick Fain, and we were talking about the fighting. And it's like, on one hand, a coach likes that because you want to see the fight. On the other hand, you don't want to get anybody injured, and you don't want your players to be undisciplined to get themselves into fights when it's time to play in games that count. And you get a 15-yard penalty, you get ejected from the game. It's just a big mess. But you do want to see the fire that's at the heart that leads to the fighting. Now, it went overboard for the Seahawks on Monday, and it ultimately culminated in DK Metcalf removing cornerback Trey Brown's helmet, swinging it at him, missing his bare head, and hitting safety Kayvon Wallace in the guardian cap with the helmet. And Wallace, by all appearances, was fine, but we've seen some violent helmet swinging. Think back to Aaron Donald a couple years ago when he blew a gasket against the Bengals in joint practices. When he made contact with a Bengals helmet on top of another helmet, you could see at one point that helmet flattened from the force that Aaron Donald was using. So these things can be very dangerous. And now that we see the NFL willing to discipline teams who are involved in fights during joint practices, I'm a firm believer the NFL needs to exercise jurisdiction over these fights when it's just one team. Because when it's left to the teams, and the NFL's confirmed it is left to the teams, are you really going to take serious action against your best players? Are your most important players exempt from whatever boys will be boys mindset would apply if they get into a fight? You're not going to suspend your best player. Aaron Donald, after he did what he did a couple of years ago, he got a talking to. You're not going to sit him down. You're not going to apply the punishment to him for doing in the preseason the punishment that the NFL would apply if he did it in the regular season. Think about Myles Garrett with Mason Rudolph, however many years ago that was now. It was a multiple game suspension, 5 or 6, if I recall correctly, and there's a chance I don't. Aaron Donald had no punishment that we know of. And the Rams, we keep that all in-house. That's a polite way of saying it's none of your damn business. I think it should be the NFL's business because eventually somebody's going to be hurt. And I think the union needs to be demanding that the NFL exercise better oversight of these practices, because at some point you have to protect the players from each other. They start getting sick of seeing each other, dealing with each other, hitting each other, and it boils over. And yesterday it boiled over in a big, big way for the Seahawks with at least 5 fights. But there will be no punishment from the NFL. And those fights happened the same day the NFL whacked the Lions and the Giants $200,000 each for their multiple fights over 2 days of joint practices. All right.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.